Hello, everybody. Hope everybody was able to go and get some lunch, take a break, coffees, waters. Everybody's recharged and ready for our next session. So Web3 represents a big paradigm shift in terms of user-owned infrastructure, the ability of users own and permission their data. So next panel is going to dive into that. So I want to invite up Mark Phillips from Dover Labs, who's going to be moderating, along with Ariel from Hivemapper, Marlene and Matthew from Streamr, and Danny from Filecoin. Come on up.
Waiting on her. He's covered. All right.
Okay.
We will have one more. We're going to give him 1 second. There he is. Ariel, everybody. Yeah. Okay. How's everybody doing?
Pretty good.
Good, yeah.
Good, okay. Thank you for joining us after the lunch break. So, as Scott mentioned, my name is Mark Phillips. I run BD at Nova. So, we don't have a ton of time here. We're going to try and keep it tight and focused, but it should be a very fun conversation. We are going to be talking about sort of tangential token incentivized physical real-world infrastructure. We are very much in this space, and we like to work with other companies that are doing similar things. So we want to have this conversation. I'll ask everyone here, because I'll do a poor job introducing you, 30 seconds on yourself, and maybe 30 to a minute on your project that you're working on.
Sure. All right, let's see if this works. So my name's Ariel Seidman. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Hivemapper. So we're building a decentralized global map, ultimately something that can compete with the likes of a Google Maps. And so the basic idea of how it works is you buy a dash cam. So this is an example of the dash cam that you buy. You install it into your car. It connects to your Android or iPhone device. And then you just drive like you normally would. And so all of the imagery and location data that's coming off of this ultimately makes it back to Hivemapper. We then take that data, process it, transform it into map data and location data that we then sell to businesses to integrate with their own applications, right? So whether it be like a FedEx or an Uber or anybody who needs map data and logistics data, they're ultimately accessing our APIs and paying Hivemapper for usage of those APIs. And the kicker is that you're earning a honey token reward that effectively gives you or confers ownership in this decentralized global map as you're contributing to it and driving.
Can I see this? Does anybody have one of these? Has anybody ordered one? There we go. All right, so lots of potential Hivemapper users out there.
Yeah,
all right, thank you. Let's go to you, Matthew.
Cool. I'm Matt Fontana, head of ecosystem at Streamr Network. And the Streamr Network, you can kind of think of it as the kind of like a people's bandwidth network. So it's a peer-to-peer protocol, operates on the internet, and there are many applications in the ecosystem that use both Helium, and then the data bubbles up, flows into the Streamr network, which is a data distribution or data transport network that can scale and remain real time for tens of thousands or even probably millions of data subscribers. So the main purpose of the network is to enable these data pipelines where data publishers can push data through these streams or channels or topics, if you're familiar with PubSub terminology, and the data will flow through and reach all the interested data consumers or data subscribers in a real-time way. And this all operates on a peer-to-peer network. So instead of the data going through centralized data centers operated by the big tech companies around the world, instead this data is flowing through everyday devices. It can be people's phones or just basically latent bandwidth on people's devices, and the data will flow through this topology and reach everybody that's interested in the data.
Cool. Thank you. Danny.
My name's Danny O'Brien. I work for the Filecoin Foundation, which is an organization that was set up pretty much a year or so ago after the mainnet launch of the Filecoin network. I think like the theme going through all of these is that we work on incentives-based cryptographic systems to encourage real-world applications. And in the case of Filecoin, it was designed by Protocol Labs, who built the interplanetary file system, IPFS, and it was an attempt to create an incentive layer over that peer-to-peer content addressable storage system. We've been pretty successful so far. We've created about, I think the latest figure is 19 exabytes of committed storage, and we now have a price level that's about a few dollars for a petabyte of storage on that network. And the incentives all come from our cryptographic blockchain mining proof system, which uses a proof of storage rather than, say, a proof of stake or a proof of work, as they used to do back in the old days.
Thank you.
My name is Marlene Ronstedt. I'm one of the co-founders of the Data Union DAO. And we are a spin-off from the Streamr project. We were founded about a year ago. And basically, we offer an SDK and a set of smart contracts with which users can monetize their personal data. So the idea is that instead of the tech giants like Google and Facebook monetizing your data, you as an individual user can start monetizing your data. And our goal is to unlock all these different use cases along data monetization. So we have a bunch of builders right now in our ecosystem that already leverage our infrastructure, which is also heavily built on Streamr. That's why we're a spin-off. And yeah, we just want to kind of unlock this range of different use cases for people to really own their personal data instead of just giving it away to Google and Facebook without, well, okay, I mean, they get a service in return, of course, but they don't really have a say in what they're actually doing with their data. So we want to change that.
Interesting. Thank you very much. Okay, so you sort of all briefly touched on this in your descriptions about what you're building, but I want to dig a bit further, and we'll start with the Streamr team. So, and I apologize if I sort of bring you two together, but Streamr Data Union DAO. First question is, why did you choose to use a token for this? And after you made that decision, what in your mind confers value on the token, and sort of how do you see that building? Right? So why a token, and what confers value on it long term? Take it.
Okay. Let's start with Streamr, and the Streamr has the data token, and so this is a quality of service token on the network, and it incentivizes broker nodes to come in and join stream topologies and provide this backbone that prevents certain decentralized attacks from happening. So Eclipse attacks is the main one that we need to prevent. And so the way we do this is we provide an economic incentive for broker nodes to come in with the promise of being stable and honest. And in terms of the Data Union DAO,
there is going to be a token as well, but we're still in a phase where we're actually designing the token economics. The idea for the Union token is going to be that there will be a staking mechanism for data union builders to stake that token to kind of ensure that these data unions are trustworthy, right? Because of course, a lot can be ensured by smart contracts and by code, but there is still kind of a threat that the data union builder would just take away some of the data, monetize it, without actually giving back to the data union members. And in order to ensure that, we will introduce the staking mechanism where the data union builders will stake on the data union DAO smart contract. And if they mess up something with the data, their stake is getting slashed and is being redistributed along the members of the data union DAO. And what's interesting here is if you look at, for example, if you usually have data violations, right? For instance, in Europe, the EU will jump in and be like, okay, now Facebook has to pay a couple of millions of a fine, but then where does that money actually go, right? So we kind of want to change that dynamic and really make sure that there is a strong relationship, and if there is a data breach, then the users should also kind of see something for that in return.
Well, so that something might flow back into the DAO in that case. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, Danny.
Well, the reason why we have a token, I think, and there's a common theme here, is to create a way of securing trust. So because our token is based on proof of replication, proof of storage, it means that that users of our network don't have to depend on the kind of centralized reputation system that we have now, where people will tend to use Amazon in the same way as they will tend to eat at McDonald's. It's not the greatest meal in the world, but you probably know it's going to be okay, right? Whereas if you can rely on mathematics, essentially, if you can rely on proofs being emitted saying, no, this data really is being stored, or this capacity really is available to store things, it means you can have a greater diversity of storage providers. It also means in the same way that if that trust is violated in some way, there's a financial penalty for the storage providers who are working there. As storage providers stake kind of in a more literal sense an amount of Filecoin at the beginning when they're setting up the system, and that's used as the penalty to punish them if, for instance, they go offline or they can no longer guarantee the storage.
And so I guess on that topic, do you see that negative incentive working? Like, do you think people keep storage on?
So, I mean, well, there are a couple of things that are interesting, right? One is that by providing a system that anyone can join in if they can make those proofs, we get a far more varied ecosystem. So we have storage providers in Africa, we have storage providers in the Far East, we have storage providers in Europe and the US. And by having that system, what it means is that our end users can say, okay, I genuinely want to store this data distributed over multiple continents. And because of the price level that we have, that means they can store it in 10 different places and be just probabilistically assured that that data is going to remain around.
Interesting. Okay. And how about you, Ariel?
So, yeah, the reason we chose the token is, well, let's kind of take a step back and look at maps and kind of historically how maps have been built. So, you know, many of you have probably used Waze, and there's two parts of Waze. There's Waze in terms of just driving around with the app, and effectively you're contributing back into Waze as a result of that. And then there's another part of Waze, which probably most of you don't see, but there's about 30,000 Waze map editors. And these are people sitting behind a desk, tediously, effectively editing and annotating a map, such that you know this is a one-way street, you know the speed limit, you know there's a no right-hand turn on a red light, all that kind of stuff, right? And so when Waze was ultimately acquired by Google for $1.2 billion, the employees of Waze made money, the investors did, as they should. But these 30,000 Waze map editors, and you and I who use the app, we saw nothing. And I look at that and say, look, without that data, there's no map. It's like beautiful software, which is nice and all, but like there is no map. And so what we said to ourselves was like, look, if we're going to build a map, the people who are collecting this data, that's where it all starts, they should build ownership in the map. And the token is an effective means to do that. The other part is, okay, so the obvious question is like, okay, why not pay these people cash, right? We get that a lot. Yeah. So the problem with cash is that in the early days, you will never pay those early contributors enough relative to the value they're actually creating long term, right? So I think that's one big issue. The other is that with cash, and I've experienced this, I built a system that's based on cash, the relationship becomes very adversarial, right? Like, all the contributors hate you, it's like fighting all the time. And so like by making it on the blockchain, open, transparent, it's hard to argue, right? With, okay, you drove this much, this is how many tokens you got, you can track back each one of those things. And so that was very, very appealing to us in terms of just making sure that Hivemapper is viewed as an honest broker. And nothing nefarious is happening in terms of how these rewards are being distributed.
Right. Yeah, it's all on the blockchain. There it is.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's talk about maturity. So, the Helium network, we had this talk earlier today about the road to 1 million hotspots. And if we look back 3 years or so, the first part of that was built based on building supply of coverage, right? We're building wireless coverage, and then we're pairing it with demand. And we see all these use cases here where enterprises and consumers are using the network. And so we're starting to shift on the IoT side from providing coverage supply to using it and driving demand. Mobile is earlier in the cycle, right? There's 5G network coverage that's growing. We announced Helium Mobile today, which should push a tremendous amount of usage or demand onto the network. So give me a few words on where you see your product, your network in terms of maturity. Are you focusing on supply? Are you focusing on demand? What are your plans for the next, say, 3 to 6 months in that realm?
So right now we're very focused on supply, right? Because the analogy here is like without the data, it would be like walking into Whole Foods and the shelves aren't stocked, right? So you got to stock the shelves with product, and that product is all supply, right? So you got to start there, and but look, you got to ultimately the data quality needs to be there, the coverage needs to be there, the freshness needs to be there, such that customers actually have something that they value and that they're willing to pay for. So I come from a mapping background. I've been in the industry for a while, so I know who these customers are, and I know what they are willing to pay for and what they're not willing to pay for. So we think of it in terms of right now, and I think for the next 9 months or 12 months, it'd be 90-10. Okay. So 90% on supply, 10% on that customers. But yeah, once you build up that supply, then it inverts itself, right?
Briefly, who are your customers for this data?
Yeah. So in the mapping world, it's transportation, logistics, automotive. Those are the big buyers, right? So this would be the Ubers, the Lyfts, the FedExes, the UPSs, DHLs, Audi, BMW, all those type of customers. That's the big kind of vertical. Then there's other verticals, commercial real estate, residential real estate, state, local, federal governments, insurance. So those are the other verticals. The good news about mapping is that it's a very, very big market, but it's also, from a use case perspective, very fragmented. So Hivemapper Inc. will focus on logistics transportation, and I think there will be other businesses that focus on some of these other verticals.
Interesting. And before we move on, just want to clarify a few things. So Hivemapper Inc. sells a commercial product for dollars and cents to make up a name, FedEx. Yeah. There's a revenue relationship there between you and the customer.
Correct.
And then what, if any, when you do a commercial deal, do your mappers see any sort of upside from that in addition to just mapping the network?
Yeah. So there's two types of rewards. There's a map coverage reward, and then there's a map consumption reward. So you get everybody gets map coverage just by providing coverage. And then yes, if let's say a FedEx comes and does a buy for $500,000, let's say, then depending upon where that data is being bought, people who actually help generate that coverage will also, in addition to that, see a map consumption reward.
That's great. I love that. Okay, let's jump to Danny before we go to the Streamr team. So obviously Filecoin is quite mature these days, right? I forget when the white paper was actually announced or released. The Helium team read it voraciously numerous times. So I mean, where are you in terms of maturity? How do you think about, I know you're speaking on behalf of the foundation, not Protocol Labs, but are you still focused on building out the storage piece? Are you trying to drive more usage and demand? Where are you right now?
Well, I think the thing that's interesting is that we've got to the point where we've created a market for storage. And so in some ways, the market itself leads the innovation. You just sit, wait for the supply and demand curve to sort of match, and you watch the actors in the ecosystem begin to innovate. And I mean, really, for our storage providers, we've been utterly surprised and delighted by their kind of ability to understand the nature of the customer base that they're dealing with and coming up with new products. I mean, just to give you a sort of couple of examples from that, one of the things that we've seen in these early days is actually the market shift. So we have a negative price for storage right now in the rewards from the coins that the storage providers gain means that actually they're willing to pay data DAOs and other organizations to store their data on the network. So there's a third party, it's not Protocol Labs, it's not Filecoin Foundation, called Big Data Exchange, and they're a third party market where storage providers will bid to take and store public usable data from third parties. And that data has to be in kind of like the petabyte range for it to make financial sense for them. But suddenly we're creating markets where people see the data they have not as a cost area, but actually as a potential profit area.
Let me make sure I understand that. So the market is such that someone who's providing an exabyte worth of storage might actually go out into the market and pay, let's say, the Streamr team to store that data on their physical infrastructure because of the way the incentives are currently. Wow, that's fascinating.
It's really.
And is that something that you guys? Is that a good? I mean, it sounds like it's a good thing, but is that?
It wasn't a deliberate thing. I mean, we saw it happening, and we were very kind of curious as to what would emerge.
Right.
And then you watch the market kind of solve this for ourselves. I mean, there are some things that we are very specifically building. For instance, we've now built a Filecoin virtual machine on this. And the reason why we did that is we realized that when you're dealing with petabytes of data, it has a gravity of its own. You wanna operate on that data where it's stored rather than long distance. And that's drawing more applications into the market, and is also, of course, another use for the coin itself. So that begins to grant more uses, internal uses for the currency, which is always useful.
Fascinating. Okay, let's go Marlene and then Matthew. So give us, you said you're quite early in the DAO. So sounds like you're probably focused on, give us the next 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, sure. So what we're mostly focused on right now is actually launching the framework on Polygon, because so far the deployment was only on Ethereum and also on Gnosis chain for the micro payments we're handling. But the problem, of course, is that we want to onboard more builders and make it really easy for them to experiment with our technology. And by moving part of that also to Polygon, it will make it just a lot more cost efficient for users to, for builders to just explore the technology and see what they can actually be building with it. We're also going to be in Bogota next month at DEF CON at one of the hackathons there, so hopefully we'll see a couple of new interesting use cases popping up there. But I would say in general we're still at a rather early stage where we try to explore the different use cases and really try it more from a grassroots kind of level before we would start approaching big players and be like, hey, you already have millions of users. What about turning yourself into a data union? I think that's more something we would be looking at maybe next year.
Okay.
Right now, we're more into community growth and working together with indie builders and stuff like that.
Super exciting. All right, and then Matthew, where are you guys at?
So earlier this year, we launched our decentralized network. So we've been running it for some time, but we've been running the nodes. In February this year, we handed over the keys so that anybody could run a node. So this was a big milestone for us. And the final 1.0 milestone is coming up early next year, and this will add the incentive mechanism so that you can start to earn tokens in a totally decentralized way through these bounty smart contracts that allow for delegation and stream sponsorship by interested stakeholders for various types of data streams. So yeah, this is what we're into at the moment, obviously working on the demand side and getting the technology adopted and solving problems.
Okay, so still very much driving the demand is where you're at.
Yeah, we've worked very hard to make the node software easy to use, and it's very lightweight, and so you can run it in your toaster. So our first test net, we had 100,000 nodes come in very easily, and so the supply side is quite easy for us. The demand side is much harder because we're this decentralized technology. We have some rough edges. There's lots of understanding. It's a whole new ball game. Signing every data payload with the cryptographic private key is very, it's very different to how it normally runs with the centralized cloud providers. So making sure that people understand how the technology works and the benefits and what it unlocks is what we're really focusing on at the moment.
Excellent. Okay. All right. I'm about to get the hook here. So you've got a captive audience of people who are very much invested in physical tokenized infrastructures. Let's we'll start with Marlene. Can we get 30 seconds on how they can best get involved with the Data Union DAO?
Yes, I think the best way to get involved with Data Union DAO is either if you're a builder, then come and join us in Bogota for our hackathon. And if you are a data producer, which all of you are, then you can join the existing data unions in our ecosystem, like, for example, Demo, they have a stand over there. Swash, which is a browser plugin that lets you monetize your browsing data. So these are the two big ones you can already use today.
Cool. Okay, Demo and Swash. Go ahead, Denny.
So I would say play around with our new tools. If you've played around with IPFS and Filecoin in the past, there's a lot that's changed and added. Web3.storage is a great place to experiment. And as a sort of sneak preview of the depth of the ecosystem, what's coming up, one of the things we're looking at is creating retrieval markets. So what we're really interested in is creating a network of nodes that will act as stores, a bit like IPFS, but for Filecoin and for letting people download stuff, and that will be remunerated in coins, and possibly a really good application for your node sitting next to your Helium node. So.
Thank you.
Okay, so many things. You can, if you are a Web3 project that wants to interconnect and communicate with your nodes, or human-to-human communication, you can use the Streamr network, of course, and if you're none of that, you can just run a node and support and share your bandwidth, earn tokens. The APY is 70% at the moment, so it's a really good deal.
Ours is easy. So you can just pre-order a dash cam and then you just drive. So
there it is. Pre-order a dash cam. When does the network go live? If you can share.
In Q4.
Q4.
We'll announce the actual date later.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you very much to our panelists, and thank you guys for paying attention.